Make sure this is on and recording.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua, Bahashem, Kakadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders, the GMS, who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards young brothers, and peace and blessings and salutation to the hopeful lake out there pushing this word and truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful lake, the believers, the listeners, whom I came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua. All right, so going into this morning news and prophecy, countdown to war, which this has been, the main headline dealing with the news, all right, the anticipation, all right, of a strike, on Iran, from America and the small hats, okay? Now, you have a lot of speculation, so we know one thing, it's a countdown to war. Now, you have a lot of speculation, whether it's in, hours, whether it's in days, whether it's in months, eventually, all right, this the move that these devils got to go with according to prophecy, man. Okay, because there's no, all right, there's nothing that's going to be done outside of the will of the Heavenly Father. Okay, so what we're seeing is the stage is being set, for prophecy to be fulfilled. Okay, which is going to usher in the second coming of Yahushua. Okay, because this third world war is going to be the stage in which Yahushua entered this realm, deliver his elect, and wage his war. All right, on these nations, beginning with Esau, Edom, and righteousness, man. Okay, so no one can say you're gonna hear hours, you're gonna hear days, you're gonna hear weeks. We're hearing all this time frame, but we know this ultimately it's the timing of Yahweh Bashem Al-Shai and what he's getting ready to do. All right, he has the timing, already set up. Matter of fact, let's get this real quick. Okay, let's get that in Habakkuk. All right, y'all, the 2, and we'll start at 1. Because we know all prophecy has an appointed time. Okay, and we just watch these things unfold, we report, as the Lord, has given his men the spirit to be watchmen. We watch these things unfold, report, and we know, all right, that eventually, all right, the will of the Lord, all right, the timing of the Lord, okay, is going to play out, okay, in real time. So you go to Habakkuk 2 and 1, I will stand upon my watch and set me upon the tower, and I will watch to see what he shall say unto me and what I shall answer when I am reproved. So you have brothers that's on the watchtower, man, that's looking out into what's happening in the earth and filtering these things to the scriptures, okay, and reporting these things to show where we at, and what I want to get into today, Lord, we'll just show where we stand right now today, with all this military buildup, okay, and all this anticipation, all right, all our war between America and the small hats and Iran, okay. Verse 2, it says, and the Lord answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain upon tables that he may run and read it, okay, because everything is full circle now. You see, the things that our forefathers didn't understand, because our forefathers were seeing technology that they didn't know, all right, that didn't exist. Okay? They were looking at technology that didn't exist in these visions. And they was writing it down and describing it as best as they could. Okay? But now in this time, as everything is full circle, the technology exists that our forefathers had visions about, and we are able to speak of these things plainly. We're able to make sense of all the visions of the prophets of old. Okay? And it said that he may run and read it because it's urgent. This is an urgent message. When we see what's happening in real time and we come and report these things, okay, to the church, this is an urgent message. Okay, because the messenger will run, okay, with that message, man. You see, he will run and deliver it to the next post, and then he will hand it off, and that's where you get that relay from. It goes back to the old carrier system where, men will run and pass off the message, okay, and that man will run to a certain point and pass the message off. That's where you get that whole relay passing the baton.
And like everything else, though, that's what I'm doing here, The report is out there, and I'm just passing on the report, Reports are coming in, and then I see other reports and I report on it, but yet we're all coincided together. That's what it is to be, jointly together, to be in one accord, right? So that's what we're to do. We're to back each other, right? And that's what I do. And this brother's always on point.
Okay, so our forefathers, we've been handed this Bible, okay? And the Lord has given us what the Rakakadash, the Holy Spirit, to understand. So now we have the book or the baton, and we're running with the message, man.
Yep.
Okay? Habakkuk 2 and 3, for the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry, man. Okay? It will not tarry. You see? So what we're seeing now is that Everything is building up to an appointed time. This war has already taken place in the spirit. All right, it's just playing out in this realm. Okay, so it's already appointed time. There's a set time, there's a set date that the Heavenly Father has for this war. All right, to kick off, man. You see, and we know other prophecies have to play out before this war goes nuclear, man. You know, but we could see some exchanges. Okay, going from Iran and America to small heads, we could see some exchanges and then another ceasefire. That's possible.
Yep.
You know, so
because the MOTB has to come out first.
Planned out how you got it planned out. But the Lord can just cause everything to start happening quick and wrap this thing up. That's a possibility too. Okay, the MOTB can be mandated in months. That's a possibility. They're storing how the Lord can do it. Not giving no time frame. Like the Lord can have it to where everything in place for the MOTB to be mandated, this war to go full blown. Because there's no guarantee that we'll make it out this year, man. Okay, that's not a guarantee. The Lord can wrap this thing up, man.
Yeah,
and that's why Scripture say, salvation is nearer than we believe. Okay,
yeah.
So we're just following these things according to the will and the spirit of Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai. Now, let's go here. Let's go from there. Because what we're seeing is these nations of the East, the kings of the East, their alliance is getting tighter. Okay, but when it comes to the West, all right, America is becoming despised and alienated. All right,
yeah.
America and the small heads, all right, are becoming alienated from their allies. Okay, and what you know, eventually everyone is going to turn on the whore. Okay, and turn this place to a desert. You see, that's the end game. You see, as we go through, the step by step of as these things unfold, well, we understand that this leads to the end game. Okay, of America being completely destroyed, and that's why when you go into prophecy, Isaiah 24:3, the land shall be utterly empty and utterly spoiled. And what is that land? America. Okay, and what's going to empty this place out are the nukes, man. Okay, there will be no inhabitants in America after this war, man. Okay, it's going to be completely emptied out, man. You see, that's why this is a very vain society. American society is very vain. Okay, where vain goes into empty. So the Lord just going to empty this place out literally, man, because people are empty, man. Okay, this is a very low frequency, low culture, all right, society, man. Very empty place, man. Everything is vain, all right, and it's pointless. America is a very pointless society, man. Okay, the basic functions of man and woman in America has become completely vain and empty now. Okay, so the Lord is finna empty this place out with these nukes, man. It said the land shall be utterly empty and utterly spoiled, for the Lord have spoken this word. Okay, so this is the word of the Heavenly Father that we're seeing play out, man. We're seeing the build up to this, to the land of America being empty. Okay, and what we're living in is the build up to it. You see? So let's go from there. Then we'll segue to that first video, because what we're seeing is the alliance, all right, between Russia, China, and Iran become tighter.
And we're also seeing the breakup of the NATO alliances. The UK said they will not support attack against Iran. So, like everything else, though, he's persistent on doing some limited strikes or weeks-long strikes against Iran. But the UK say they ain't with it. You cannot use our bases.
All right. And that's the Lord that's assembling that alliance. Okay? That's the Lord. Jeremiah 15:9, it says, for lo, I will raise. So it's how Bashim Al-Shai is doing this. I will raise and cause to come up against Babylon an assembly of great nations from the north country. So this is why, Russia, China, and Iran have this technology, all right, to counter America's military might. Okay? Because the Lord raised up this alliance. Okay? This is the Lord's work. These nations are just tools. But it's the Lord. His will is behind this alliance of these kings of the East, man. It's all about Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai and what he's doing in the earth, man. Okay? These nations just happen to be chosen to be vessels to take down Babylon, man. To begin the process of taking down Babylon. It's going to be how Shai is going to finalize all judgment, man. Even amongst these nations whom the Lord is raising up, man. To go to war with the whore. Okay? It says, and they shall set themselves in array against her. From thence shall she be taken. Their arrow shall be as of a mighty expert man. None shall return in vain. Okay? And that's why these nations, the Lord has allowed these nations to tap into what you call the PGM, the precision guided munitions. Okay? The Lord got these nations on the level to where these missiles are going to be extremely accurate, man. All right, to fulfill the will of the Lord, man. And that's to turn America to a desert. Okay? So let's go here and let's kind of look at this alliance, all right, that we see building up. okay, with this assembly, okay, of nations, okay, beginning with Russia, okay, with Russia the chief prince, Magog the chief prince, okay, and the chief prince will be over the militaries in the whole region. You know, he will be over the affairs of other princes and kingdoms of a whole region. So this is the chief, Russia is their chief prince, okay, that these nations are gathering under the banner.
It's their weapons
Russian
that are being supplied.
Military might, okay, to oppose the West, okay. So let's
The deterrence, if you will.
All right, and let's play a few minutes of it, okay. And just going to expound on what's happening real time, okay. You know, just going to where we stand. You see, so let's play this.
Right now, to watch this video, 3 foreign navies are sharing the exact same water with the United States military. Russian, Chinese, and Iranian warships have simultaneously deployed together into the Strait of Hormuz at this very moment, not in a simulation. Real ships, real sailors, real anti-ship missiles, all pointed toward the same horizon at once. And here's what makes this more than just a military story. They moved into position at the exact same moment the United States was sending its own armada toward the region. 2 American aircraft carrier strike groups, the USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS Gerald R. Ford, are both converging on the same 21-mile wide bottleneck. Through that 21-mile corridor flows roughly 20% of the entire world's daily oil supply without interruption every single day. And right now, as of February 20th, 2026, opposing military forces from both sides are physically present at each end of that passage. If you think this is routine geopolitical noise, you haven't been watching the pattern that's been building since 2019, because what's happening right now isn't a coincidence. It's a progression, and it just reached a new invisible threshold. So let's break down exactly what's happening, why both sides made their moves simultaneously, and what this entire situation is actually signaling. On February 17th, 2026, a Russian corvette, the Stoiky, docked at Bandar Abbas, Iran's main naval base on the Strait of Hormuz. The same day, Chinese and Iranian warships moved into the Gulf of Oman and the northern Indian Ocean, completing the formation. This was the official launch of Maritime Security Belt 2026, a joint exercise Russia, China, and Iran have been running every year since 2019. The official framing is familiar: anti-piracy, search and rescue, protection of trade routes, standard diplomatic language. But calling this routine in February 2026 means ignoring the entire strategic context surrounding it. And the context is everything here, because at the same moment these 3 navies assembled, the USS Gerald R. Ford was crossing the Strait of Gibraltar heading east. Trump had publicly given Iran a deadline, 10 to 15 days to reach a nuclear agreement or face consequences he described simply as bad. The White House confirmed that senior national security officials had gathered in the Situation Room specifically to discuss options regarding Iran.
This is Chase. He's currently touring the country.
And yet, despite all of that, Russia, China, and Iran moved their ships into position anyway, together, on schedule, with visible confidence. That is not a coincidence. That is a deliberate, calculated signal, sent in steel rather than in diplomatic language. Here's what I think is actually happening, and it goes deeper than what most mainstream coverage is focusing on right now.
So it's the spirit, you know, because Russia, China, and Iran do this every year anyway, at the same time. Okay, so the timing of, you know, these American aircraft carriers being, okay, in their region, all right, at the same time that they're doing these drills anyway, so this puts Russia and China's Navy assets, okay, within the vicinity of American Navy assets. The Lord is mustering the host of the battle. The Lord is drawing these nations out, man. Okay, let the mighty man draw near, which means we went into the other day, which means to approach each other. Okay, so the Lord is causing these nations to approach each other, and then it's a spirit because this is their 7th year doing it. You know, 7 goes into completion, man. Okay, this is their 7th year that Russia, China, and Iran has done these drills. Okay, so the Lord is he's putting all these ingredients in the pot and stirring this thing up, man. Okay, and the Lord cooking. You see, let's go play a little more, about 4 or 5 minutes on this one.
Russia, China, and Iran are not attempting to start a conflict. They are doing something far more strategically sophisticated than that. They are establishing real time with real assets. Any potential U.S. military action in the Strait won't happen in a vacuum. If Washington moves against Iran's nuclear infrastructure, it won't simply be managing Iranian fast boats and shore-based missile systems. It will be operating in a contested space where Russian and Chinese naval units are physically present, and where miscalculation carries a fundamentally different weight. That changes the escalation calculus in a way no press release, no UN resolution, and no diplomatic note can replicate or substitute for. Analysts use the term escalation management through presence. What it means in practice, you raise the cost of action without pulling a single trigger. Now here's something that gets lost in day-to-day news coverage. This exercise has now completed its 7th consecutive year running. The number matters. 7 years of trilateral naval coordination means 7 years of shared procedures, communication protocols, and genuine tactical familiarity. In 2023, the drills added nighttime operations and drone integration, a direct response to how modern naval conflict evolved after Ukraine. In 2024, they introduced live fire components, pushing from symbolic exercises toward actual operational readiness testing on a real timeline. By 2025, the 3 navies were running electronic warfare simulations, radar jamming, electromagnetic disruption, the invisible layer of 21st century conflict. By 2026, what started as a diplomatic gesture has become an integrated military capability that planners in Washington and London have to genuinely model for. The progression tells its own story. You don't build 7 years of shared naval systems unless you intend for them to mean something when it counts. Now add one more layer that almost no one is connecting. The timing of a separate exercise that happened just weeks before this one. In January 2026, just last month, Russia, China, Iran, the UAE, and South Africa conducted a joint naval exercise in the South Atlantic Ocean. It was called Will for Peace 2026, and it was framed explicitly as the first BRICS naval operation, a deliberate milestone, not a footnote. Russia's presidential aide Nikolai Patrushev stated afterward that BRICS should now be given what he described as a full-fledged strategic maritime dimension. Think about what that phrase actually means. BRICS started as an economic conversation. Trade routes, development banks, alternatives to the dollar system. Now it's running synchronized naval exercises across 2 separate oceans. The South Atlantic in January, the Strait of Hormuz in February, same calendar month. The economic project and the military posture are being deliberately stitched together into a single unified strategic architecture in real time.
I will call a nation assembly of nations of the North Country, man. Okay, so we're seeing these nations assemble.
Be thou guard unto them. It also says.
All right, there's a lot of chemistry, okay, that's been formed, between, all right, these nations, man, these kings of the East, man. Okay, so the Lord got this thing perfectly timed. The Lord got this thing mapped out. Everything is in its appointed time. Okay, so it's just a build-up, man. Just a build-up, a countdown to this war. All right, but just as it says in Jeremiah, all right, I will cause and raise up, okay, an assembly of nations, man. And this is what we're seeing. The nations are assembling. It started as an economic bloc in the BRICS, but now it has turned into, all right, a military alliance, man.
A military might to counter the so-called U.S. military might. And like everything else, though, prophecy, it's speaking. And this is the year of apostasy and of sellouts. So we're going to see a lot more of that as we get closer and closer, right? Yahushua told us that you shall hear wars and rumors of wars, famines, pestilences, earthquakes in diverse places. All these, the beginning of sorrows. And we're taking a good look at that, and we're seeing that all that's in place already. And we're speeding things up, The Most High is speeding it all up, So it could happen at any moment, at any moment's notice. So like everything else, though, you can see, though, that this brother is on point, GMS Kingdom Mind him. And here it is, of course we got a distraction, if you hadn't caught yesterday's video. We got a distraction, with this whole Mexican cartel thing, taken down. Because he's about to deliver a speech. Oh boy, he's got to get the people on his side, man. He's got to get the people on his side. He's got to also get the people against him, right? You got to have both sides, come together and coming against at the same time. Trump to deliver State of the Union amid looming Iran warfare. So like everything else, though, he's got to sound like America's the greatest, most powerful nation. We just took down the cartel, boasting about everything he can do, right? Trump's State of the Union comes amid deep national division. And that's what they want, is division, right? Kingdom against kingdom, right? And that's what they are moving towards, because it's all controlled, and they have plans. They have plans to synchronize everybody and line them up, to take the MOTB just like they did with the vaccination. Sidelined lawmakers and rising fears of war with Iran. So, like everything else, though, as a distraction, well, he just recently conducted, and of course it's going to get support for ISIS, right? They need support for ISIS, because, hey, that's what it is. Support the war. Support the war, Support, Trump invading Caribbean countries, overthrowing leaders. Support him, taking on drug cartels. Support him, in every way possible. MAGA, and yet this war with Iran, these wars do not benefit Babylon the Great. Since when has taking Venezuela's oil and all the resources benefited Babylon the Great? Did you see the gas prices lately? They're going up. A new 6% or 10% gas, per mile thing has been added. So now it's over $4 a gallon. Again, because, hey, it's not going to benefit the people. It's only going to benefit the rich, right? And Donald Trump is yuppie motherfucker that just doesn't give a fuck about anybody who voted for him or anything else. He doesn't give a shit about Babylon. One thing he cares about is this rich, fat ass, you know. And all you people, you serve him. You serve Satan in the highest, you know. You know, because that's pretty much what an Edomite is he's a Satanist in every way possible. These are pedophiles and they're child eaters. They do everything unthinkable to the animals, to children. Yeah. And you idolize this guy. You envy him. You wish you could have bitches galore. You know, like Eazy-E. You 2/3. You're like Eazy-E. And you wish you had bitches galore and that you could just do whatever the fuck you want and live like a gangster. That's who you want to be. You want to be just like that. U.S. President Trump is set to address Congress on Tuesday in his annual State of the Union speech, in what is expected to be a closely watched appearance ahead of the midterm elections, against a backdrop of a deeply divided nation, a marginalized Congress, and mounting fears of war against Iran. Well, like everything else, though, because Trump just did, this great operation. That's a good distraction. We're not distracted by it. Fucking Secretary of State Rubio will brief Congress behind closed doors on developments related to Iran ahead of the speech. D.C. expands its military presence in West Asia in recent months, deploying 2 aircraft carriers, more than a dozen additional warships, fighter jets, and other assets to the region. But guess what? You know, these are not as good as the things that can sink them. Ayatollah Khomeini has said, look, you know, you're making a huge mistake if you think that you can come up against us as easily. But in between all that, right? In between all that, you got a lot of things going on in the Caribbean, right? Because these are also moves in the Caribbean Sea, you know, just as distractions, you know, make you think, oh yeah, he's taking on narco-terrorists, right? Remember that? Well, it's back again. U.S. military blows up another small boat in the Caribbean Sea, killing 3. U.S. Southern Command announced Monday that its terrorists blew up yet another boat accused of running drugs and killing 3 people. Yeah, these are drug boats. Command said the boat was targeted in the Caribbean Sea and described the people it killed as narco-terrorists. There we go. You know, beat headset, fucking douche, and, Trump's justification. So, like everything else, though, you know, the Trump administration justifies conducting extrajudicial executions at sea for alleged crime that doesn't receive the death penalty in the U.S. Right. There are a lot of drug cartels that aren't killed in the U.S. You know, but he recently led an operation to kill a drug cartel. The cartels have been running at Babylon the Great for such a fucking long time. Nobody ever did anything about it, right? You know. Now all of a sudden he gives a shit? Why would he give a shit? Well, because he's got to give you a distraction. You know? So here we go. More terrorism in the Caribbean. You know, because these are drug cartels. You know, and they have to be killed. You got to kill every last fucking one of them because that's what the U.S. does. The U.S. kills anybody who opposes them, right? You know, that comes against their might. You know, the hammer of the whole earth. But wait, there's more. Venezuela calls on the UN to pressure the U.S. for Maduro's immediate release weeks after abduction. And like everything else, though, they have kidnapped the leader and brought him on U.S. charges, which this is an international thing. Brought him on U.S. charges of alleged drug cartel dealings, right? Saying that he was a part of, this drug cartel. And that the cartels were running through Venezuela, which has nothing to do with Mexico or the recent operation, but nonetheless, though, you know, stealing their oil and taking everything, saying that he's going to run Venezuela. Well, you know, Venezuela is now calling on the UN to pressure the U.S. for his release because this is unlawful in anything, right? Venezuela has formally petitioned the United Nations for the immediate release of President Nicolas Maduro, following his abduction by U.S. terrorists in early January operation that Caracas slammed as illegal. Maduro has pleaded not guilty to the U.S. drug trafficking charges, describing himself as a prisoner of war, and that's exactly it is. That's exactly what it is. Under the pretext of leading a cartel of drug and gun traffickers, Maduro was abducted from the presidential palace at Caracas and transferred to a prison facility in New York pending trial. You know, so like everything else, so that was the pretext to go in and to pretty much take over, and he's definitely making his moves against Mexico, but Mexico's going along with it. Because, of course, the Mexican government went right along with Donald Trump, you know, and pretty much taking out a supposed drug cartel, and it's a lot deeper than that. But most of all, these are distractions. These are distractions that make you think that the U.S. is the real American hero, right? You got to portray that. You got to portray that as, oh, he's doing something about drugs. He's doing a lot of things. And like everything else, though, a lot of people are detesting him. See, you got the divide, too. A lot of people are doing walkouts. This even happened in Reading. There was walkouts there. And then ISIS motherfuckers, you know, fucking pigs started harassing kids who just pretty much are detesting what ISIS is about. Which ISIS is nothing about terrorism and using terrorist tactics to, you know, intimidate everyone. But it has nothing to do with so-called illegals. It has everything to do with what they deem as illegal. I mean, these landlubbers, these people that stole land that didn't belong to them, you know, have the audacity to say whether you're legal or illegal, but yet at the same time can come out and just shoot people that are speaking out against them. Because it's really about controlled opposition. It's about a lot of things. ISIS is not there to deport so-called illegals, despite the illusion that they give you. But ISIS is in fact there to just do whatever the fuck they want to with no repercussions. School officials ordered 2 eastern Pennsylvania schools into lockdown on the 20th of February while dozens of students left the schools and became unruly. This move comes after officials directed the students to cancel their planned protest against ISIS operations. Well, like everything else, though, you know, you can see that this divide is already there, you know, because a lot of people are tired of ISIS, you know, and they should be tired of it because these masked motherfuckers go and fucking shoot whoever is against them, right? You know, even though this other person was definitely a protester, a provocateur, you could say she was a Karen, a provocateur, but they just opened fire on her because she was trying to escape, because they're not really law officials. If you're covering your face, you're not a police officer. You're not a recognized police officer. You're a fucking terrorist. That's what you are. You know, and that's why I compare ICE to ISIS all the time. But like everything else, though, who's the terrorist in the DC, right? The same Amalekites, these same IDF motherfuckers, you know, the least of the flock. CIA tip, instrumental in killing a Mexican drug lord. So, you know, you gotta believe, you have to believe that the U.S. has a war against drugs, even though they supply us the drugs themselves. But they're going after it. U.S. intelligence agencies provided crucial information for the Mexican operation that led to the death of one of the country's most powerful drug lords. Yeah, a drug lord in which your U.S. military fucking backs. The cartel wouldn't be so fucking great if the U.S. military was not backing them. You know, these are ex-SEALs, you know, Marines, etc. that, you know, couldn't get a job elsewhere, so they decided to back cartels. Something that the U.S. created, but they're going to blame somebody else. El Mencho died from injuries after being targeted on Sunday in Tolosa in the western state of Jalisco. Mexico's defense ministry said the cartel responded with reprisal violence against the nation. So you got to believe that the U.S. are heroes, you know, while Mexico's in chaos. So you got to have U.S. intervention like they did with ISIS, right? Yay, man, you know, they got to have a war against ISIS, got to have the war against cartels. You know, the U.S. has to invade Mexico, you know, to establish safe haven again, right? You know, so the U.S. is about to invade Mexico. He's had his ambitions against Mexico for a long time. Mexican officials said the U.S. provided complimentary information for the operation against the longtime head of Jalisco New Generation Cartel, major trafficker of fentanyl, cocaine, oh boy, yeah, and methamphetamines, oh boy, into U.S. market. No, don't blame those SEALs. Don't blame, you know, them for, you know, importing all this shit from Afghanistan, the poppy fields. Don't blame the U.S. For, you You know, all the shit they did in Vietnam and bringing it over here. No, you got to blame Mexico. You got to blame Mexico because they're all Mexicans that are doing it. We know who the cartels are, and we know that Esau is the ultimate cartel, but they're giving this illusion, right? Give you this illusion that, oh, they're fighting a war on drugs, you know, as he's amped it up, as reasons to just go shooting people, just go blow up boats, you know. Like everything else, though, it's a Zionist apocalypse to distract America because there are plans for war against Iran. And it's no wonder why this guy ain't on YouTube, because he dares to say the word Zionist. You know, these Amalekites, these small hats, are behind everything in this distraction because they have a plan for war against Iran, but they want you to be distracted with Venezuela and all the other stuff. See, and by the way, it was King Bibi's idea for the U.S. to invade Venezuela and to remove Maduro. That was all part of King Bibi's plan because he's made more trips to the U.S. than any other country. Hey, you see ambassadors coming from any of them other countries over there in Europe? Not even the UK has come over here, right? Did you see a prime minister come over here? No, but you see King Bibi coming over here, right? Because King Bibi controls Babylon. And like everything else, so these are distractions for their plan for a war against Iran. And of course, their continued violation of ceasefire and the so-called Gaza New Plan, the new phase, you know, which is nothing more than their plan to occupy and control the Greater Israel Project. So you got distractions going on. If you hadn't caught yesterday's video, well, there's more.
Port of Ireland. I was part of a group chat on my phone. Started getting these messages. Everything was like, shelter in place. Watch out. Don't come to the convention center. It's really hitting the fan here. And then I started turning on the news. And of course, you could see that all of the Zionist-controlled media outlets were at it again. The American Zionist-controlled media outlets like the New York Times and CNN, the Fox News Channel, of course, Washington Post, NBC, Reuters, USA Today, CBS, ABC, every other Zionist-controlled propaganda machine run by their dual-citizen overlords and their Israel-first editors is hammering home this Puerto Vallarta chaos narrative nonstop as if the world is ending. 24/7 coverage, the same clips on repeat, the same dramatic music bed, the breathless anchors acting like Mexico just turned into Syria overnight. They portray this as a full-blown apocalyptic cartel war zone. Tourists supposedly barricaded in their resorts. They can't leave, don't leave. Crowds sprinting through the Guadalajara airport in sheer terror, dropping their suitcases, ducking and diving in slow motion behind check-in counters like it's an active shooter situation. Thick black smoke plumes choking the skies over the entire Puerto Vallarta Bay. From the buses that are on fire, entire Costco warehouses, gas stations, OXXO convenience stores set ablaze, random cars torched on the highways, and they loop these videos endlessly. Narco blockades spreading like wildfire across Jalisco. Nayarit and Colima and Guerrero are on fire. Military
It's on
helicopters
fire!
are buzzing at low altitude.
And the reason to invade cities and overthrow governments.
Into literal fire traps, homemade spike strips, flaming semi-trucks blocking every major artery. And then the airlines pile on. Delta, American, United, Southwest, Air Canada, Alaska Airlines, all suspending flights into Puerto Vallarta and Guadalajara. The U.S. Embassy jumped on board with their urgent shelter-in-place warnings for Americans in Jalisco. You can't get out. Just hunker down, stay out of the way, specifically naming Puerto Vallarta and Chapala and the surrounding areas, warning of this ongoing security situation. Okay. So what's the point in all of this here? Obviously, to scare the living hell out of ordinary Americans, to make them believe that El Mencho's death has unleashed literal hell on earth, prison riots, slaughtering guards, shootouts everywhere, total societal collapse. And they keep them just glued to the screen with their hearts pounding, completely forgetting who actually controls the narrative and why they're being fed this panic. So once again, leave it to us. It'll be this network that cuts through all the bullshit and gets down to brass tacks once again. Most of this, I'm sure this will shock you, but most of what you're seeing here is theater. Pure Zionist smoke and mirrors designed to sell maximum fear porn while giving the truth a dirt nap. We have boots on the ground, contacts in Mexico right now. People who I know, people who I trust, people who have moved to Mexico from Canada or from the United States, people who live there, who drive these roads, who talk to locals daily. Jake GTV is still there. As a matter of fact, he's in the green room. He'll join us from the apocalyptic Ground Zero of Puerto Vallarta in just a minute. And then, of course, you have eyewitness accounts that are flooding X, flooding Telegram, people who are not part of the scripted media circus. And all of those reports paint a completely different picture. You know what's shocking? It's a completely different picture than what you're getting from entertainment networks like Fox and InfoWars. Alex Jones is losing his mind over this. Yeah, there's been a few dozen vehicles or buses that have been burned here and there. Mostly symbolic targets, a couple of gas stations, some OXXOs. Temporary roadblocks and narco barricades thrown up for show, smoke plumes rising over parts of Puerto Vallarta that'll dissipate in a matter of days once the fire departments move in. Maybe a prison scuffle or two that got out of hand, but guess what? No mass murders sweeping through neighborhoods. No piles of civilian bodies stacking up like cords of wood in the streets, and absolutely no nationwide bloodbath. Even these mainstream reports themselves, when you dig past the screaming headlines, they admit it in the buried fine print that this is just retaliatory unrest and blockades in response to the Mexican military's raid, heavily supported by U.S. intelligence under Trump's direct pressure to take out CJNG's El Mencho. 0 civilian casualties. 0. Just the standard cartel flex. Burn some shit, block some roads, flex some muscle, remind everyone that they're still in charge. Then the media blows this up to doomsday levels on purpose, because if it's only contained payback, if it's not full Mad Max south of the border, the distraction loses its punch. Sharp people start asking the real question. Why the hell did this crisis explode exactly when it did? Well, just 3 weeks ago, Trump's DOJ released 3.5 million pages from the Epstein files. We're talking about thousands of videos. We're talking about thousands and thousands of photographs. More than 2,000 videos, more than 180,000 images, detailed flight logs, emails, photographs, the whole rotten elite child rape and blackmail network laid bare. Trump is named over 37,000 times in this file dump. There's still 6 million files that we have been promised that we will never see. And what do you know? Suddenly, Mexico's on fire. And every single television screen in America is flooded with burning buses and terrified tourists, instead of the actual names of the child rapists and their enablers finally getting dragged in front of a tribunal, convicted and sentenced to extreme accountability. These files are career enders and worse. Resignations are already happening. Investigations are launching into prominent figures across Hollywood and Wall Street, elite science circles, politics, media itself. Meaning that the Zionist financiers and billionaire moguls and their Gentile puppets and entanglements go so deep and get so ugly that even we didn't fully grasp the scope before this dump. Epstein's entire empire was a textbook Zionist blackmail honeypot from day one. Ghislaine Maxwell, the direct spawn of Mossad's super asset Robert Maxwell, bankrolled by the Israeli intelligence fronts, protected for decades by dual citizen lawyers and media barons who sat on this story like it was their firstborn. These files go into island surveillance tapes, little black book horrors, videos that destroy any plausible deniability for the sick and depraved, blood-drinking, baby-dismembering cannibals that LARP as serious heads of state. We're talking about high-ranking government officials, banking and finance tycoons, actors, all of the household names that you have been familiar with for years. And suddenly you know things about them that are so dark. It's hard to even put these things into words or to fully comprehend. No coincidences whatsoever that this tribe's media machine swivels instantly to cartel headlines, right? They can't let regular people start connecting those dots.
So, yeah, Esau's being exposed on a level, and it's all distractions from what's really in the files, right? But, like everything else, though, and then, you know, war. You got war on the horizons, right? You got a lot of distractions going on because, yeah, Trump's all over them files, right? I mean, everybody knows he's a child molester. He's a pedophile, and so is everybody with him. All these people are sick fucks. Esau's a sick fuck. He's a child molester. Trump's Board of Peace mulling stablecoin for Gaza efforts. The Board of Peace established by President Trump requires a $1 billion contribution for membership. It is reportedly exploring a stablecoin for use in rebuilding Gaza's economy. Wow, it brings in the new digital dollar. So, new digital dollars there. So, yeah, stablecoin, which is the U.S. version of a central bank digital currency, just not calling it, right? Trump announced the formation of the board in January. Membership requires countries to contribute $1 billion for a permanent renewable role, while the U.S., according to Trump's social media announcement, pledged $10 billion. The majority of countries in Western Europe declined invitations to join, while 26 countries, including the Israeli state, Saudi Arabia, Hungary, and El Salvador, were founding members. So, like everything else, though, stablecoin. That new global currency, it's coming. The MOTB is not coming, it's already here. It's just a matter of implementing and mandating it. Now, they have a January 1st mandate for everything to be digital, in January, right? But they could speed this thing up at any time since the legislation's already there. See, this thing can blow up at any time because, in the brink of war, and then casualties and all that, could increase the demand for a digital dollar. You see how this all ties together? U.S. evacuates non-emergency personnel from embassy in Beirut as it prepares for potential attack against Iran. The U.S. ordered the evacuation of non-emergency personnel and family members from its embassy in Beirut as it prepares for their attack against Iran, which would provoke a full-blown regional war. So, like everything else, Israeli state recently escalated strikes against Lebanon and continues launching violation of November 2024 ceasefire deal. It's not a ceasefire. Over the weekend, New York Times reported that the U.S. removed hundreds of terrorists from its bases in Qatar and Bahrain. The U.S. made similar moves in the region in the lead up to the 12-day war in June, launched by the Israeli state. So like everything else, men of war, they're getting prepared. Let me just make sure it's recorded. Yeah, it is. Okay. Gotta watch this thing, right? Western forces in Erbil relocate ahead of possible strike against Iran. So Erbil, Iraq. France, Norway, Germany, Sweden, and Italy among countries that have repositioned troops in the region. A few days ago, amidst heightened U.S.-Iran tensions, military helicopter landed at the Erbil airport in Kurdistan region of Iraq. Although Western terrorists are rarely seen on the city streets, Erbil Air Base is heavily staffed with terrorist and military choppers which fly overhead every day. Now this airport could potentially become a target for Iran if the situation escalates. Since 2018, the Kurdistan region, including Erbil's airport, has come under attack. So they're just moving it because they know that there's going to be repercussions for starting a war, for supporting a war. And like everything else, to gain U.S. support, right? The people will start to back Trump, just like they are with the cartel thing, because everything's on fire. Like you said, and he's supposed to deliver his anal State of the Union address tonight, too. Ooh, boy. Got to support him, because he's going after these, everybody wants to be a MAGA. Or if you're not a MAGA, right? This good divide. Maliki rejects U.S. pressure to withdraw from Iraq. Because like everything else, he happens to be a Shia cleric. I talked about him before. I did get his name mixed up with Al-Sisi, sorry, But nonetheless, he's a Shia cleric. The former premier and top candidate said it was quite possible to reach an agreement on weapons with the Iran-backed resistance in Iraq. So, labeling him as a terrorist, right? Nouri al-Maliki, former prime minister and current candidate for the premiership, has vowed to continue with his campaign despite U.S. pressure and threats to cut support for Baghdad if he's re-elected. I have absolutely no intention of withdrawing out of respect for my country, its sovereignty, and its will. No one has the right to say whom we can or cannot vote for. Yeah, as if you have voting rights. The U.S. controls Iraq, and if they don't get their way, they're going to carry out more assassinations. Baghdad has held discussions about disarmament with many of these factions who, in exchange, demand the complete withdrawal of U.S. terrorists from the country, but the U.S. hasn't. D.C. has reduced its forces and concentrated troops in fewer bases within Iraq, but still maintains significant pressure under the pretext of advising Iraqi forces. The number of U.S. Army terrorists recently withdrew from Syria are heading towards Iraq. Just because that's closer to Iran anyways. Maliki previously served 2 terms as prime minister in the wake of the 2003 invasion. He leads the Islamic Dawa Party, whose leaders returned from Iraq from exile in Iran after U.S. terrorists toppled the late Iraqi President Saddam Hussein. Maliki has historically enjoyed close ties with Tehran, but also maintained a balanced relationship with D.C. U.S. President Trump's government threatened to cut off Iraq, and Maliki is re-elected. So, like everything else, and there's more. Because, of course, there's spillover. They're bringing in ISIS terrorists from Syria into Iraq, so that way they can, do Mossad operations inside Iran to try to disable Iran. But Iraq also knows about this. Iraqi militia warned Syria against involvement in U.S. ground military action against Iran. So they already know. The Iraqi armed group Kataib Hezbollah warned the Syrian authorities against being involved in what it described as U.S. ground military adventure against Iran. So like everything else, though, they also see what's going on there, because you got to remember the new interim government is more loyal to the Israeli state. That's why al-Jilani hasn't really done anything about the Israeli state taking territories, because it was part of a deal. But like everything else, though, well, the prelude to war, right? As you're seeing being gathered there. And then you're seeing Magog being a guard unto them. Now, like everything else, though, I'm just trying to get this to go. As we know who the chief prince is, we know that that's Putin. I'll put in the amp. I haven't done amp in a while. So like everything else, though, they're going to be in this region. And like everything else, though, as this war progresses and after Babylon's taken out, well, guess what? Russia and its forces will also be taken out by Yahweh Shai and the angels. Don't forget about that. But nonetheless, though, this is what's happening as right now, Magog is being used as part of the Eastern Alliance against the West, right? The East against the West, and just, part of a plan. So that way, Russia can be isolated, and Yahweh Shai and the angels can take them out too. Ezekiel chapter 38. Verse 3, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, I am against you, O Gog, chief ruler of Meshech and Tubal. Don't forget that the Most High Yahweh is going to send Yahweh Shai and the angels to take out Russia and its forces, but he's also using Russia to take out Babylon. That's just a part of the mighty plan of Yahweh Shai. I will turn you around and put hooks into your jaws and bring you out, and all your army, horses and horsemen, all of them magnificently clothed in full armor, a great horde with buckler and large shield, all of them wielding swords, meaning all your heavy weaponry is going to be moved into this region. Iran, Ethiopia, Libya, with them, all of them with shield and helmet, which we know that these are all the places that are going to be safeguarded as well. Gomer and all its troops, that's talking about Turkey. Bet Togarmah from the north parts, the remote parts of the north, and all its troops, many people with you. Ugog, aka the leader of Magog, Putin, if you will, be prepared, prepare yourself, you and all your hordes that assemble around you, and be a guard and a lookout for them. So, like everything else, though, we know that it's all falling into place. The formation of the battlefield is there. And like everything else, though, I got one more here before I close this out. So hopefully this has all been edifying. We're watching the drums of war there. It's happening. Yahweh Shai and the angels are about to return to destroy Gog and Magog after Babylon the Great is destroyed, and to gather the elect from the four quarters of the earth. And of course the MOTB to come within all this. And you see the stable coin already being set up. It's already here, as it's already there in the Gaza plan too. It's all part of a new world order that's coming to formation. Now I got one more here before I close this out. Then I want to say Barak the Yahweh, Barak the Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakadash, Wa Abba Babal. Brakatam, Jehovah Elect, Shalom. So, rumor of war, right? As we are getting closer.
Joining us to discuss this is independent geopolitical analyst Pepe Escobar. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Farida. My pleasure.
Now, according to our source in Iran, the U.S. might delegate striking Tehran to Israeli forces. What is your view on that?
It's very important because I think you are breaking this news. This means that you managed to talk to a very high-level IRGC source in Tehran. These are the only ones who have the leeway to pass an information so sensitive like that. Very, very good thing, because it clears the way to the situation for Trump at the moment is between a very hard rock in a very hard place. This war is unpopular in the West if it happens. Over 70% of Americans don't want a war on Iran. They want solution for their economic problems. So if this is launched by the United States, is bye-bye to the midterms, and Trump is instantly converted into a lame duck presidency. I'm sure among his, I would say, very mediocre inner circle, people are telling him that. This is the only thing that registers for him. So subcontracting the attack to Israel will be a way of, okay, we've got Israel's back. But it will backfire anyway, because the first counterattack by Iran will be directed against Israel, and it's not going to be like during the 12-day war. It's going to be totally devastating.
Now, considering the US is gathering a whole armada around the Middle Eastern nation, how likely is this move going to help Washington to avoid being designated as an initiator of war, in your opinion?
Well, for the whole global south, this means almost 90% of the planet. That's what it is. It may not be for the vassals in Europe and some of the vassals in West Asia, right? Middle East is the British denomination. So everybody knows that, and everybody knows this is unprovoked war because there is a negotiating track going on. They're going to meet this Thursday again. And Foreign Minister Arakshi, he has to explain this 24/7. Everybody in the region outside knows that Iran does not possess nuclear weapons and does not want to possess nuclear weapons. This comes from over 40 years ago, the first fatwa by Ayatollah Khomeini, reiterated by Ayatollah Khamenei. But if they are forced to go for a nuclear program, they might revise that. But this is all hypotheticals. Iran does not need a military nuclear program. They need a civilian nuclear program, which is being proceeding very, very well since the JCPOA, which was almost 11 years ago signed in Vienna. So we are in the middle of a gigantic fake news spread by a Zionist axis and by circles of power in the West that Iran wants nuclear weapons. This is beyond fake, and everybody who follows this dossier knows it.
And what do you think this conflict could have on the Middle East?
It's not a conflict, Farida. This is a war. If it starts, it's going to be a serious war with global repercussions.
Shalom.